Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm David, and we're going to have a great talk today about exactly that, right? So what does it mean to sort of be successful? And with, I think, the panel that we have here, what does it mean to actually, what did you do to become successful? And how did you, well, avoid certain gaps? Or how did you maybe went into a gap and learned a lot from it while doing? That I hope that the panel will sort of talk about how not to do it. So let's first give a round of an introduction and introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And what makes your company unique?
All right. Hi everyone, Lucas from Tequila Mobile. Actually, I'm a leading free-to-play developer from Poland, and we started in 2002. So we are actually in the industry for 12 years. So we've seen a lot. When we started, there was still, black and white Nokias when we started to make games for. Later on, when the market began, when the smartphone market began, we jumped in, and we've been free-to-play company since 2007. So actually, way before our first iPhone came out, we've been already experimenting with the model. So yeah, we learned a lot. We made lots of mistakes on the way too. And hopefully I can share some of the lessons here. So thanks.
Hello everybody, my name is Tomislav. I'm coming from the company called Nordeus. The company's flagship product is Top 11. It's a football management game. So the company was founded here in Serbia, in Belgrade, but at the moment we have offices all over the world: San Francisco, London, Dublin, Belgrade, Skopje, and so on. 150 people. We started the company 5 years ago. So the game was launched more than 4.5 years ago, approximately. So far we have more than 100 million registrations and around 4 million daily active users. So I hope I can share something useful to you guys during this panel.
I'm Ilya. I'm from a company called Tune, based in Seattle. I'm here on behalf of a tool we call mobile app tracking, and actually we assist guys that make great games to understand where their valuable users come from, and where they can actually spend their money and how they allocate their efforts. And a little bit, I used to be a game developer for years, so I moved over to this side because I think it's an essential tool for game developers to also understand what they're doing with their user acquisition. So I think combined with the developers on stage, I think we can definitely give a great insight on the do's and don'ts of user acquisition.
Good, thank you. One question for you as well, Lucas. How many daily active users do you have, and what kind of total volumes of downloads do you have?
We are sitting on over 100 million downloads cumulatively. So yeah, but part of our DAU number was until I think 2 years ago, it was a decent number was still on feature phones, where we actually monetized pretty well with free-to-play as well. Right now we're since 2010 speeding up on smartphones, so a decent chunk of this volume is on smartphones. iOS, Android, 50-50.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about sort of to say the flow. Talk a little bit about in-app purchases. We're going to talk a little bit about user acquisition, because if you do well on in-app purchases, you want to have more users and you want to monetize better. We talk a little bit about the failures then, so sort of what did you do or what went wrong when you bought them, and we go through sort of in the end what you've learned and how we can sort of tell the audience how to be successful. Just a little bit of an idea to see who is in the audience. Who of you are indie developers, small indie developers having a studio, just started? All right, we've got a few of them. Who is working for a big company and try to see what a competitor is doing? Also a little bit, okay? So we don't want to share too much of the data. Who's doing specifically user acquisition? Also a few. Good, all right, I think we're gonna get some nice learnings in there, so let's jump in. So can you share a little bit of insights in sort of what is the percentage of in-app purchases that you see? And what is the split between that monetization part of the in-app purchases and monetization by ads or by other ways?
Okay, so I start. Well, in case of our own games, that pretty much depends of the genre of the game. So for casual games, we have a Battlefriend series, which is basically like a Words with Friends from Zynga, but it's a battleship game, for example. It's been pretty successful, lots of DAUs. But monetization with in-app purchases has been always pretty weak. You know what you can sell in the battleship game. Yeah, there's not much stuff to sell over there. But we've been aware of this. Instead, we knew that the game can have a pretty good scale, so we've been monetizing this with ads. We plug in Charbus. That was performing pretty well for us. So in that kind of games, ads can make up to 60% of the revenue. In our own example, but for the mid-core titles and for the games that have a closed core loop, when players can play indefinitely and evolve with the time, of course, in-app purchases are the main revenue driver. So in some cases we've seen 95% of revenue coming from in-app purchases. So probably that's what's driving those top-grossing games. And this is in-apps rather than advertising, I think.
Okay, on our side, we have only one game that's live, and fortunately I can't share the percent of paying users. But I can say that that number can always be higher. And we're working on this hardly. One thing that we're trying to do is introduce something besides the in-app purchases, like videos, incentivized videos that will just help our users understand that they need a virtual currency and maybe convert them later. So they will just take out their credit card and spend some money. In terms of percentages, I would say it's probably around 90% are in-app purchases, and everything else is offer walls, video ads, and so on.
Yeah. You have obviously some experience as a game developer in the past, but what kind of take do you have on this?
Well, I think to talk with Tomislav, it can always be higher. I think everyone's aiming for a higher percentage of paying users. And my experience is that you can achieve that by two ways. You can actually try to increase the revenue per paying user by making your game better, which is of course a necessity. But you also, and that's my experience now, you can identify where your paying users are coming from and spend more effort in acquiring users that are actually going to pay. So I think in the past people spent way too much money on or effort to acquire users from channels that actually didn't give them any return on investment. So I think that's something we're in a phase now that game developers start understanding that there's different ways to optimize the revenue. And I mean, we're all professionals, so I think that's in the end what we want to do. But I think the industry average now is between 2-3% of users in your game start paying. I mean, it's true that depends on which kind of genre you're in. I mean, casual is a lot lower. But I think the revenue for hardcore gamers, for example, per paying user is a lot higher. So it's different. You can't say for any game there's no recipe. Otherwise, I think we would all make the same recipe in the end.
Well, that's the goal of the end of this panel, right? So everybody shares exactly what they've learned, and then everybody becomes a millionaire. I think that's the idea. Is there a big difference between iOS and Android in terms of monetization? And if so, do you have an idea why that is? And maybe Tomislav, you can begin.
Definitely, there is a difference. Our game is a cross-platform game, so users can play whatever they want. They will just continue their progress. They will play with the same club on any platform. But we definitely see some differences across Facebook, iOS, Android, and I guess iOS is better because simply if you spend hundreds of dollars on a device, like iPhone or iPad, you have bigger potential to spend money. It will be easier for you to do it. Of course, there are certain devices, Android devices, which are interesting. So some users that are having Samsung S4, S5s are also monetizing really good. So I guess that would be the big difference.
Well, I read a report yesterday from eMarketer, and they did some research, and then it was interesting to see that definitely iOS is better monetizing than for in-app purchases than Android. But it was surprising to see that some people play on both, like iOS and Android, and apparently these guys pay 3 times more than anyone else on the or Android or iOS. So I found it. I didn't even know that people had like Android and iOS, but it was interesting to see that there's a big difference between the two operating systems. But I think Android is definitely gaining a lot of paying users. But
well, yeah, from our perspective, it's pretty similar. Although you need to take a couple of factors into account. So when you directly compare on a high level iOS and Android, then yes, iOS is monetizing slightly better. Android is catching up. But then when you apply some geography filters on that, you'll see that, you know, at least in our case, when we take US for example, and we compare Android with iOS, then it's pretty much the same. So it also, the geography and the device distribution plays a role here. In US, we've seen, even slightly better conversions on Android for some games. For some others, it was iOS who was leading. So it really depends. But on Android, what you can also do, is that you can go beyond Google Play. You can experiment. I don't know, in China, you can experiment as well with third-party app stores. And we did a couple of tests, and when we actually plug in some carrier billing APIs, so we could skip the credit cards payments and switch to one-click operator payments. The conversion jumped from like a 3% to 15% even. So of course, payments are not that high. You're not getting 70% of what people spent over there, but it's just another opportunity that you can do with Android. But generally, we are, the first priority for us is still iOS. Right now we are developing a mid-core game, and it will launch on iOS first before we bring it to Android next year.
I think you also have to consider, what are you paying for a user? So is it in the end worth paying for it? Maybe an Android user pays less, but if he costs less to acquire, maybe your revenue can higher for an Android user. So I think it's very important, and geographical wise, that can change a lot. So you need to understand where they're coming from and what you're paying for them.
All right, cool. Thanks for sharing some, I think, valuable insights for as much as you can share about sort of in-app purchases. The reason why I ask is sort of to get to know the basics of sort of how do you monetize, right? And where do you monetize from? Is it from in-app purchases? Is it from the advertising itself? Because I think that has a different sort of, if you know that, you have a different tactic on acquiring users. So skipping to the second part, and let's talk about user acquisition. So first of all, I would really love to know, what kind of metrics do you look at when you do user acquisition? I mean, every company is different. One looks at the money that they earn. Obviously, it's a key metric that you want to have, right? If you get $1 out, you need to have $1 in at least. But what kind of metrics do you look at for your game, and how long do you look at it? Is it like a week retention? Is it a day retention? Is it a year? Please share as much as you can.
All right, so I start. In case of our own games, it's all about the retention. So we are applying some pretty regular day 2, day 30, day 60 retention rate, sometimes even day 90. What we found that is the better retention rate we can get in our games in a long term. So if we have a high day 60 retention rate, then we are better able to monetize the users who are actually really engaged, and they are staying for longer. And and this is some long-term thinking about your game. Day two is of course very important, but the players who spend the most money and the players who will make multiple purchases are those who are really engaged in your product. So at the end, it's about the quality of the product and the audience that you are targeting with that. You can get a editorial choice on App Store or be featured on Google Play, but that's actually you're showing your game to everyone. So lots of people will download it if it's featured, but also lots of people will drop out on the first day. So if you look for the retention rate, you optimize your first user experience, and then you apply some lifetime value calculations, so you know actually how much those engaged users will spend in your game, after X days. This is what I think everyone should be doing, and this is actually what we are doing right now. And I have to say that we haven't been doing that in the past, and it was a costly lesson. So yeah.
Okay, besides the standard ones like daily actives, registrations, and so on, I would also say in the short term, retention, first day, 3 days, 7 days, and so on. In the long term, retention together with some ROI, where you would compare how much did you pay for each user and how much that user is bringing you back. And besides that, some virality, and lately some positions for certain keywords on the app stores, because we see a big this huge amount of users is actually coming through search, and we need to constantly optimize our search results on both Google Play and iOS. So we keep experimenting with this, and it's changing on a daily basis. So that was really important.
Cool. I think you can share quite some insights on metrics side. And one thing that I want to particularly go into is what kind of tools, and besides Tune, obviously, it has a lot of analytics, right? But what, in your experience, when did you find out, like, hey, I need to have metrics, right? Without that data, I cannot be successful. And where did you look at?
Well, I used to have my own game studio, and we spent quite a lot of time building a game. And you think that you're building a great game, but I think you don't need to think it, you need to prove it. And so I really paid a valuable, costly lesson by failing with a huge investment in the game. And that actually, and that like 2005, so that made me realize that I need to have the analytics straight. And I think that was really early in the days. One thing I'd like to add on the retention and payments, I think you quickly need to start discovering patterns of your user behavior, and then you can actually start analyzing, okay, in the end, if a user shows this kind of behavior in the first week, most likely he will become a paying or loyal user, because sometimes it takes a very long time before you actually see money coming in. I mean, there are games that takes weeks or months before the user starts paying. What you want is as early in his journey through the game, you want to understand, okay, is this behavior which leads up to payment? And I think some of the companies master this, and they are actually the ones spending the most on user acquisition because they know that they make a return on every investment. So I think it's a combination of loyalty and retention. And of course, if you have only 5% or 3% paying users, the rest of the users need to be very loyal because they need to keep the game going. And especially in a multiplayer environment, you need to have like a mass of people playing it, otherwise it's going to be boring. So it's a different set of metrics, but again, patterns of user behavior in your game is also something that's really important. That's why data analysts are becoming more and more important in the game. Not just the game designer, but also somebody who understands the metrics behind it.
Yeah, cool. And we go way back now, right? We go to the beginning of your companies when they started to be successful, and you had your first couple of thousands of installs, and you're like way too happy that it's happening. Like, holy shit, what's happening now? How did you at some point then discover that, hey, we need to have this data? And what kind of companies did you go to? Who are providing that kind of data? Or did you brought it in-house and said, hey, there's no one who's really doing it the way I want it to be, so I'm going to hire a data analyst and we're going to do it ourselves? And maybe, Tomislav, you can give some insights.
Okay, so in our early days, we didn't measure so many things, and I would say we were blind. So that was one of our big mistakes, and we learned it hard way. But once we launched the game on mobile platforms, and the game became cross-platform, we were really struggling to find a partner or third-party solution that could support this kind of game. And that was back in 2011. There were a lot of companies offering some kind of analytics, and it would be a web only or mobile only. Nobody was doing a cross-platform thing. So we decided we'll build in-house solution. And again, it was a hard thing to do. We have a custom solution that works for our games only, and we are trying to combine this with some third-party solution and some app tracking agencies, companies, their solutions. So combine all this data and store it in-house and try to analyze it all the time. So that's the way we do it now.
Well, I think it's always a question of build or buy, basically. I mean, are you going to build something completely custom and maintain it? Because building is one, but maintaining a product is a second one. So I think if your core competence is making great games, then you should keep making great games. You can, of course, if you get bigger, have a dedicated team to build analytics tools and those kind of things, which is great, but still, it's always a question. I mean, I think some people build great tools which are great for their needs. In the end, I see a lot of companies, especially the mid and larger size companies, actually using different kind of tools, and they use their own business intelligence tools to actually, because there's so many different types of analytics in your game, they use one of their own tools to actually visualize everything, because aggregating data is one, and then the second one is visualizing it, and I think that's what we see a lot. So people use, for example, our tool, download the data from our tool, download Chartboost data, and import it in their own tool to actually start understanding the whole ecosystem, because you have very valuable and sensitive data of your paying users, and you don't want to share it with too many people. We see more and more people sharing it actually with us, because they understand that sharing is a necessity to understand actually the behavior. But I think I've seen companies build it themselves and then later start using a third-party tool. So there's no one. Yeah?
That's us.
So there's not one good thing. I mean, that's a decision for everyone on his own.
Yeah, we are such a example of a company which was very ambitious and wanted to build an in-house solution. So we wanted to keep our data in-house at the beginning, and when you release a game and it's performing well, then of course you have no problem. Yeah, so you're watching some pretty regular metrics, like DAU and the average revenue per DAU, and you're happy. But later on, when you release the second game, it's a fuck up. It's you suddenly start to wondering what's going wrong, and what we did, it took us 2 weeks to get out of our robust data log to extract some data that we need, and to build a cohort, for example, to see to check the retention rate. So we learned a lesson that it's especially right now when you have access to such a vast amount of great solutions out there, it really doesn't make sense to invest into your own, unless you of course are a big company and you want to have your own BI team on that. But if you are a game developer, just focus on making games, do what you're good at, and just spend some little money on the good analytics package, or use a free tools like Flurry or Game Analytics, I think. Yeah, so I can highly recommend outsourcing that part and use solutions which are built by guys who know their job. It pays off, and not in a long term. Actually, it pays off in a short term.
Cool. Well, thanks again. So now we know a little bit about metrics, right? How was your in-app purchases versus monetization? How are your apps doing? And obviously they've been a success. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here. But so if we then look at sort of, we know the metrics of how our users behave, right? And we have the flurries or the game analytics, and we know where those users are. So then let's start talking about channels. And obviously there's a lot of different channels where we can buy those users from. There's some obvious ones, but also maybe some less obvious ones. So just to get a little bit of an idea, what kind of channels are you guys using on user acquisition, and which one is definitely not working as good as you thought it was?
Well, I don't use. We're actually a channel basically. We have one SDK for more than 500 channels, so and we visualize where you're spending your effort. But I think. Actually, what surprised me is that still real incentivized traffic is still a source of a lot of installs, and I understand now why, because it has to do with the velocity and the amount of downloads to get a ranking, which actually works. And then, but it was actually surprised that still quite a lot of people are using pure incentivized traffic, so that's a good thing. I mean, it's not incentivized video, just incentivizing a view. That's completely different, but incentivizing an install, which is a bit like on the edge, is it still allowed or not? But I think we talked about it already. I think every channel has its own benefits, and you need to know when to use what channel. I mean, valuable users, you pay more, but you have less volume. And if you have, well, you want volume, you pay less, but the quality is less. So I think it's a completely, and it works for every game different. So it's not one answer, I think.
Okay, I agree. I would say it really depends on the country, on the platform, the type of game. So we tried everything from incentivized, non-incentivized. We do mobile, we do Facebook. The game was built on Facebook 4 years ago, and then we built our mobile clients on top of that. So Facebook was initially really good channel for us, and still is on mobile. But there's still a lot of other channels that you can use on mobile. And as far as I know, some of our really good users came through a chart boost, through some test campaign that we did. And that was, for me, unexpected, because it was a really small amount of users, but they were monetizing really good. But incentivized, we tried this too, and it can boost your rankings, of course, but then you'll get a bunch of downloads, and if you don't have a really good way to keep those users in the game, they'll just flood your servers, and maybe you ruin the gameplay. If it's a game like ours, where it's really important to play with your friends, you will end up with a bunch of people that you don't even know, and it's a dangerous thing to do. So depends.
Can I add one thing? I think Tomislav already mentioned it. One really important channel is your App Store search. I mean, 65% of apps are still installed through App Store and Google Play Search. So I think and it's a free channel, and I mean, people forget about it. I think only 10-15% of all installs are coming through paid user acquisition. So it's very important. We talk about paid. I mean, organic users are always the best users, but it's also very important to optimize your app store and understand what people are searching for, what are they searching for your competitors. So I think it's very, well, don't underestimate that effort that you have to put into it. And actually that's a channel that we haven't even talked about, but it's one of the biggest ones. I mean, if you don't do user acquisition paid, that's the only channel you have. So I mean, make sure that if you're an indie and you don't have a user acquisition budget which is like 6 digits at least, then just make sure your app store is optimized completely.
Cool. And to sort of tailor the questions a little bit, Lucas, do you see certain areas or countries that do way better, Eastern Asia or Eastern Europe or just US or Canada? What kind of channels and geos in specific do you see that success that you maybe didn't expect?
Australia. That was the country that was actually always performing for us better than US, and it was up to 30% better RPU or ARPDAU depending on what you calculate. So I can definitely recommend that one. But getting back, I totally agree with your words that the best challenge you can get is the best traffic you can get is organic traffic, and actually it costs lots of money right now to buy users, and if you have a free-to-play game and it's 1, 2, maybe 3% of those users that you monetize, you really need to have a very solid monetization, a very solid gameplay, so you can make up the cost, and you can actually earn some money, do ROI on that. So everything that you can do, starting from cross promotion through implementing some affiliate systems in your games. A couple of big guys did a very nice affiliate system when you can refer a friend, and when you refer a friend, you are getting something in the game, and it's like a multi-level marketing. But in games, it really works, especially in those games which have closed loops and players can play for a long time. So it makes sense. And as for the paid user acquisition, actually, from our perspective, we tried almost everything. So we tried incentivized installs in the early days with one big company which was doing that. So it never paid off. I mean, the whole model is, in my opinion, very, 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 strange. Let's call it this way, because those people do not have a motivation to play your game. They're just getting something in a game that they came from. We also tried guys like free app a day services with some mixed results. There are some local companies, especially in Europe, who are doing this per country. So we once have very nice results in France when we actually went into top 10 and stayed there for some time. But generally, I think this is also low quality traffic in terms of monetizations, because the nature is that those users are looking for free deals. So the conversion rates haven't been spectacular in such kind of games. And also, some time ago it was more everybody was trying to get to the top with a quick short burst campaign, and it was amazing to see how much money you can burn in just an hour. And it's nice to see, but it's also stressful when you're at home, you're running your acquisition campaign, your wife asking you, honey, what you're doing, and you're saying, oh, I'm just spending some little money, and then you're going for lunch and you're getting back to your computer and you just spent 50,000 on in the meantime. So that was incentivized installs, which I actually do not recommend to you unless you have some money and unless you like watching them burning. So that's my lesson. And always, if you do that, always set daily budgets, because if you forget it, you might be surprised with the bill. But it's the best traffic. Once again, is the organic traffic. So do what you can to get it. App Store optimization is also one of the hottest trends right now, because the search is getting so many installs. Facebook, for example, works really well for us, but it's all about targeting and the ability to exactly laser precise pinpoint the users that you want to get. This is amazing. So it's not just geography. It's not like male, female. It's actually I can hunt users who love card games because I'm making a card game. And I can, reach out to Magic of Gathering fans, and I can show an ad to them, and it's not incentivized. So it's awesome, and it can cost a little bit more sometimes, but it's definitely worth the money.
I think one of the hot topics besides ASO is at the moment also re-engagement. So you've seen users with certain behavior in your game before, or if they've paid or whatever, and you want to actually find them again. So that's also something. It's harder because the amount of users you can target is a lot smaller, but still it's what people are trying to do, because you know a user, you know their behavior, you know their patterns of payment, so you're trying to target these specific users, and I think that's something that a lot of people are doing. It's also in e-commerce, but in gaming it's also one of the trends.
Cool. And to make it a little bit more tailored as well, can you name one or more companies that we need to go to? Obviously, after this panel, everybody is going to each three of you to ask more about sort of that optimizing the app store and getting that K factor, right? Getting the organic growth. But can you name one or more companies that you would say, hey, I would definitely reach out to these kind of companies because they know their thing. And definitely as a beginning games company, you don't know that yet until you have the data analyst in house.
I'm not unbiased, but we have a great ASO tool.
Yeah, we use these guys. So if you're running, if you want to spend some money on acquisition, then you need to plug in a solution that will let you recognize where the users are coming from. And these guys are good at it. There are some others. There are some, analytics that you should get, starting from Flurry, Game Analytics. We are using Swerve for our own game. It's a big mid-core title that we're doing right now, and we chose Swerve particularly because they got A/B testing, live A/B testing. So we are basically able to test everything in real time using their A/B testing by segments, by user segments, and then apply the solution that worked and converted better. So so we are using Swerve in that case. As for App Store optimization, there is one small company which is doing a good job. Its name is AppCodes, if I remember correctly. So it's a cheap service. It costs like $50 per month, or I think it's per month, and you can optimize your key phrases and the search position. So I don't know how they're doing this because App Store is a closed ecosystem. It's not like Google, who is, don't mean Google Play, but Web Google, who is sharing what people are looking for. So it's easy to see what terms are getting the highest amount of searches. But I don't know. These guys have sorted this out, and they are able to indeed improve the rankings of your apps in the App Store search. So worth to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think this is again. I mean, iOS, they just crawl the app stores and just do an analysis of all the top 50 or top everyone actually, so you can compare on keyword search how you're ranking and what your competitors are ranking. But I think Tomislav is better to explain. But I think GameSauce, the website, just launched a review of like all the analytic tools out there. I think it's just on the website. I just saw it this morning. So you can just see what are you looking for, and then you have like an overview, comprehensive overview on a certain levels. Okay, which company would be a fit for you? And of course, I mean, I would always, if you're smaller, go for a free option first and see if it works for you, and try to understand. And then you can move on to a paid version. But I think there are enough tools out there, but there are only a few viable options. I mean, there's so talk to your friends and see what they are using. I think that's always the best option. Get recommendations from people who are actually using it, and because some things work very well and others not so well. So just talk to people.
Tomislav?
Yeah, I would say it depends what you want to do. So if you want to acquire users, there's a lot of people you can talk to. There's Facebook. There's the agency that can manage everything for you. I don't know, like Fetch. If you want to do something on your own, you can use Chartboost. You can do some cross promo with other developers if you already have some contacts, or you can contact some of them through Chartboost. If you want to do some analytics, like you said, if you don't want to spend anything in the beginning, go with some free solution like Game Analytics, Flurry, and so on. On the other side, if you have some budget for this, there are a bunch of tools. Some of these guys are already here, like Delta DNA or Honeytracks, a lot of others. And in terms of App Store optimization, you have your own solution. There are also others like Sensor Tower or some other ones. So just talk to some people and try to find something that will work best for you. Again, it depends on what you want to achieve. So
Cool. All right.
In the end, it's worth investing money in making you understand what you're doing. So I think, and it's not expensive. So I think it's definitely something I would recommend if you're starting into user acquisition. It's definitely worth the investment. It's not going to cost you thousands to start with from day one. This ramps up, of course, if you start spending more. But if you're spending more, obviously you're doing something good, because then you're making money. Otherwise, you shouldn't spend more.
Cool. So we have quite some companies going past, right? We have Apps Code for apps optimization. We have Flurry. We have Game Analytics. We have Facebook. We have Chartboost, and many others. Just to get a little bit of a sense, what is more valuable for you as a company? Is it trying to get that user and trying to get him attached to your game and the retention, and monetizing by retention, so get him in the game as long as you can? Or is it more about new users that monetize after a few days, and then you're done, right? You know he monetized after 5 days, so thank you for your cash, to say it, and then just move on to the next one.
I'm pretty unbiased in this, because I think like a solution like Chartboost, why people love Chartboost is because it's an honest and open tool, and I think that's also part of it. It's not just the users, it's also, do you trust the company? Is it open? Where actually your users coming from? Do you know? Are there direct relationships between the developers? And so I think it's not just about getting the right user, but also what's the company that providing you the users like.
I would say in the long term, definitely retention and monetize all the time. But again, depends on your strategy. If you are a company that's producing a lot of games with a short life cycle, and your strategy is to have games every 6 months, then you don't care about retention, and you can monetize day one, and just don't think about this user anymore. But in the long term, I think everybody wants to have a game that will last for years, that can monetize for years. So
Yeah, I think it's about retention. I mean, I don't believe in that you can, simply make a quick buck and build a healthy business on that. And this is ultimately what we all want to achieve here. I mean, it's one thing to monetize the users, but it's another thing to build a healthy business that can last long term. And you just you just need to focus on building great product. That's it may sound cliche, but actually that's a true and the only true. If you have a good game, then people will get engaged, and they will be spending money. Hopefully, a decent percentage of them. But making quick buck these times, this is something that I don't believe it can last. Maybe it was possible a couple of years ago, but I don't think it's easy.
Well, I don't completely agree. I mean, I don't like the business model, but app flipping and having like 300 games out there and monetizing my ad revenue, it's still a substantial business model. I mean, we're talking about games that monetize through in-app purchases, but basically, there are a few examples which are great, like Subway servers. They monetize by showing ads, and they have a sustainable model with a long time. But there are many companies out there that we've never even heard of making, quite a decent living. I think some people with a really engaging game are jealous on the revenue these guys are making just by cranking out games, monetizing them by ads very aggressively, and then some make like 20 games. 4 games a month isn't crazy. So I think it's not a business model that I like, but it is a model which works for some.
But the difference is that these guys have traffic. So when you have a traffic and when you have 100 million DAUs in your game, how you make money is a secondary question, because you can wait weeks and wonder whether to monetize with ads or maybe apply some other monetization on that. But you have the traffic, And I'm telling about the most common situations when you don't have a traffic. So you are building a great game, and it's 1,000 DAUs, and you are wondering what to do, and applying ads on that, it's not a sustainable model unless the scale grows. And when you have a good product, and when you actually are able to make a hopefully good return on the users acquired, then you can scale it. And this is what I'm referring to by saying it's a long-term perspective.
I think that's an interesting, and I think there's definitely going to be a follow-up discussion after this panel. But I think I've asked quite a bit of questions on sort of how it works, how in-app purchases work, and how monetization works. But are there any folks listening to us thinking, not working? Are there any specific people here that have a burning question they'd love to ask?
Well, if nobody has a question, I'm going to have one question. We understand organic traffic is great, but we have to sometimes pay for traffic. And I think the last Flurry report I read was about $1.85 for an iPad install. Put you on the spot. How much are you paying for your users? What's your cost per install? What's the average at the moment? How much are you paying?
I don't make games, though.
It depends on the country, but I would say on average 2.5.
2.5 per install,
Yeah.
in dollars. Okay.
I would say beyond between $1 and $2, depending on the market. But actually, I'm trying to limit the paid acquisition as much as possible. So after a few years, you're getting black belt in organic traffic, and this is what I what I recommend to all of you to see, because spending money, especially during the holidays when prices are going up, it's almost impossible to make a ROI for an average game company. I mean, average that by average, I'm not saying that the games are average, but it's just a handful of guys making return on the user acquisition out there, and most of us is not making a positive ROI when the prices are high. So that's why I'm limiting spending as much as I can. But if I start, it's probably between $1 and $2 depending on the market, and we usually target Western markets.
Okay, appreciate your honesty. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes. Please speak into the microphone for the camera.
Hello. Thanks for the talk. I have a question. What's the best model of acquiring users? Is it cost per click, cost per install? Have you ever heard about cost per purchase? And what think about it? Thank you. One more question.
Is CPI, cost per install. But if you can go with a cost per engagement and just set some targeted event in your game, like you want a purchase or you want users to complete a tutorial, you will not pay until they complete the tutorial. So if you can do this, I think you can get some great results.
Yeah. Well, CPI is something which is, I think, the most standard and most commonly used. I'm not a big fan of CPC. It used to work years ago in old AdMob times when you've been able to buy clicks like 2 cents per click. But yeah, on mobile, it's a nature of a device. It's not a PC when you need to point your mouse on a banner and perhaps make an accidental click. On mobile, all of clicks almost are accidental. So you're getting charged for clicks that brings you nothing because somebody tapped on the bottom of the screen. But CPA, cost per action or engagement, this is a very good model.
I think it also depends a little bit who you ask. If you would ask a publisher, they would say CPC, because then from the publisher, they don't take the risk of sort of earning their money, right? From an advertising point of view, obviously, the more closer you get to that engagement and knowing that if I spend $1, knowing that this user will spend $2 in return. The closer you get to that, the more willing you want to spend your money, right? Because in that case, if you know I put $1 in and I get $1.50 out, you have an indefinite budget.
I think then we come in the middle and we do CPM. I think in the end that's a model that works because you can optimize from both sides. I personally think that that's not the best model, but CPI is really difficult because you have to spend a lot to understand where your users are coming from and then start optimizing, while CPM you have more flexibility in both ways. And again, there's two people in this marriage. There's the publisher who shows the ad and the advertiser wants to buy the user, and you need to keep both happy. And what I've seen with the CPA, it's very hard to keep the publisher happy because probably his overall revenue will go down if he doesn't optimize, and he doesn't have the tools to optimize, because in the end he doesn't get the value for the user from the advertiser. So it's really hard for a publisher to optimize based on CPA. So I think, but this will always be the dance that they were having between the publisher and the advertiser. So it's interesting to see, but I think a CPM model where the publisher has he knows how many impressions he's showing, so he knows in the end what he's gonna make, is a model that can work for both as the advertiser because they can optimize, and the publisher knows he has a steady revenue. So basically, but this already a larger publishers are already asking for fixed CPM deals. So they're already saying, okay, you can have a minimum budget, just give me 5,000 per day and you get this much impressions. And then if the advertiser is smart, he can optimize that traffic and actually pay less than he would normally have paid on a CPI deal. And the publisher has a higher revenue. So I think then both win.
Thank you. And yeah, another question. How about cross-promotion? What part of users you gain via cross-promotion between your games? And do you work with other publishers in case of cross-promotion? Thank you.
Can you hear me? So we did some testings with Chartboost, but unfortunately we don't have it integrated on both platforms. So that's something that we are targeting to do in next couple of months, because we think that's one of the channels that it can bring us a lot of quality installs. As I said before, some of the users that we acquired before are spending some money and they're really good in terms of quality. So.
In our case, it's it depends on the amount of your portfolio, in the portfolio of games, how big it is. In our case, we don't have many games. I mean, we are on a long term. We try to monetize every game for as long as possible, and in our case, it's up to 10%. But it's simply, what limits the number is the amount of games that you are cross-selling from. So it grows with the size of the portfolio. If you can plug into some traffic exchange networks, then perhaps it can be higher because everyone is sending users to everyone, basically. So it can make sense.
I think what's important is that you have to understand what's the value of a new user for one of your games, or what's the monetization rate of showing an ad for a third-party game. Because then you can start balancing between, do I cross-promote one of my new games, or do I actually show an ad from a third party and make money on this user? So that's the balance that you need to find, and there need to be more advanced tools to actually sustain that.
Okay, well, we've officially run out of time. David and the panel, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure if there's any other questions, you can see the panel outside. We'll be starting again in 5 minutes with Julian from Wooga, who'll be talking about what happens when user acquisition actually becomes too expensive, so it'll carry straight on. Thank you very much. Great job, guys. Thank you.